I hope you guys are having a really great summer. We have been hard at work planning our return to school. It's been really sort of strange in a lot of ways, as I'm sure it has been for you. But the directors and I and members of the Board of Trustees have all been hard at work trying to make sure that we give the best possible experience when we return to campus. So why don't I just sort of launch in? We got about a minute into the 9:30 hour. And as people come in, they can catch up. The nice thing about the Q&A section is that the answered questions will still show up, right? Those will be recorded. So if people do show up late, they can see which questions have been answered and they can go back to the recorded version when we provide that. So this will be available to the entire community moving forward. So first and foremost, I want to reiterate our commitment to in-person education. As I said in the plan that we sent out that we titled 2020 Vision, one of the things that I think is really fascinating about this whole process is that for maybe 15 years now, we've been talking as educators about how the world of education is going to be fundamentally changed by technology. And for the longest time, the assumption was that the bricks and mortar proposition of an ordinary school was not going to be the centerpiece of education in the future. And what we have found, I believe, is an opportunity to really see how that works, you know, and frankly, no one did a great job of online education when you have to pivot so quickly. But at the same time, we're seeing families and kids, and my own son, as a matter of fact, really seeing that they miss school, they miss their friends, they miss the social aspect of school, they miss having contact with their teacher and having that back and forth in real time. I think that because humans are very social creatures, we really value that personal connection. And we found that the supremacy of the relationship built in person between a student and a teacher is at the center of the educational project. So for that reason, we are absolutely committed to keeping kids on campus 5 days a week. I've gotten a lot of questions about the Clark County School District plan. And look, they have realities that they have to contend with. They have class sizes that we don't have. They have transportation issues that we don't have. They have tech issues that we don't have. And so we're in a really fortunate position to be able to say, we have a plan to bring every student back on campus 5 days a week on August 17th. And I can say that with confidence, and we can do that with social distancing. I can get into some of the details moving forward as we move through this webinar, but that is really important for us to reiterate, is that our plan is to be in person on campus on the 17th. So that said, I need for anyone who has concerns, whether health concerns or otherwise, about their children being able to come to school in August, that you please reach out to your division directors. We need to make plans for students who will be taking advantage of remote learning, and we need to craft that plan because the majority of our plans have shifted towards offering offering an in-person educational experience, and the online version is something that we need to build out for what we assume is going to be small numbers of students. Okay, so please reach out to us directly, and we will start working in that direction. I also wanted to take a moment just to nod to the teachers. The faculty of the Meadows School has been engaged this week and will be engaged in the weeks to come in really high level and intensive professional development. It has been really remarkable to see how they've jumped into it with both feet. I've been really proud of them and really humbled by the fact that when we told 100+ teachers, we need your summer and we need you to dedicate yourself to learning new things in case we have to do partial or fully remote learning, they did it, and they're in the process of doing it right now. And so I think it's just remarkable, pat on the back to them, because they're learning these things. And if we're forced to do a hybrid model or a remote model for short periods of time, our teachers are going to be up to the challenge, and they're going to be able to offer the very best experience available. So thank you to the teachers. Now, just to sort of jump into the questions, the $1 million question that I've gotten repeatedly that I think I just need to be as direct as possible about have to do with the tuition model, right? So people are curious, hey, if what I want to sign up for is an in-person experience and the Meadows can't offer that, will I get a tuition refund? And at the moment, like I said, we have plans to come to campus and have every child on campus every day for a full school day. We plan to deliver the Meadows experience on our campus. Therefore, the Board of Trustees has not made a determination regarding tuition remission beyond the $2,500 remission for returning families. So that's in place, obviously. But what I think is really important is that the board has shown when a dynamic and fluid situation arises that they're willing to respond. Okay, so at the moment, there is no guarantee that people who are uncomfortable so uncomfortable with a remote experience that they'd like to leave the school, we're not considering that at the moment. The board is going to respond in the moment to whatever arises, but what we will offer on this campus will be second to none. And so we're welcoming kids back to campus. That is our commitment. And the only thing that will shut down the school is a statewide shutdown. And so that's where we stand at the moment. The next question that I had is, when will the school schedule be finalized? And what I want to show you here is, let me share my screen really quickly. And just give you a sense of what I'm looking at here. These are the numbers that I'm looking at all the time. Every day, this is updated, and this is nevadahealthresponse.nv.gov. And so if you look, these are updated every single day. And so this is one of the numbers that I look at as I start trying to plan for the fall. I see right here is where the government ended the shutdown and moved into phase 2. You saw the numbers, and these are hospitalizations by date. You saw the number of hospitalizations come down to here. Since then, we've started seeing them creep back up again, okay? It's not a steep curve, but it's a curve. And so what we've seen over the course of the last month is that we're seeing hospitalizations rise again, and that is concerning. Then you look at this chart, and you start to see, again, you've got the end of May right here is where we move to phase 2. After this long period of dropping numbers, we move to phase 2 here, and this red line is, sorry about that, this red line is indicative of the 7-day moving average. So over the course of the past 7 days, we've seen a large increase in the positive percentage of tests taken, right? So this is not just the number of cases that have been detected, which can be deceiving if we are testing more and more every day, which we should be, but this is the moving average of how many of those tests that are taken are positive. And we're here, as of yesterday, we were north of 10% of the tests taken were positive. So I don't say this to alarm anyone. These are realities, but I do say this entirely to say, look, this is what it has looked like over the course of the past 3 or 4 weeks. And I don't know what the next 3 or 4 weeks are going to look like. However, we have a plan on campus to have every kid in class, and whether that's cohorting, right, in lower school, beginning school, and middle school, whether that is spreading students around campus and having them on campus and limiting classroom sizes and limiting their proximity to one another, we've got plans in every division to deal with this. So I do not know specifically what the schedule is going to be. It will not be 2 days on and 3 days off, as Clark County School District has said. And I understand that this is really anxiety inducing. I understand that the lack of certainty is very difficult, particularly when you're trying to plan for a school year, but I'm trying to respond to realities in the moment. And when you start looking at how fluid the situation is, I can't make a determination today what things are going to look like in 6 weeks, right? And so what I'm saying is, even if things progress and look worse in terms of public health, we can still welcome kids to campus, keep them distanced, and keep them safe by following the CDC and government guidelines. So I'm sorry, I don't have a firm answer for what exactly every experience is going to look like. but we are committed to coming back to campus. I had another question about whether or not the Meadows is going to rely on government standards, or are we going to shut down if the government doesn't shut us down? Right now, no. I mean, my commitment is to stay open as long as it's feasible. Like I said, we have the capability to stay open and to keep kids distanced in a way that other schools don't. So, we can engage in protocols to take temperatures, and we can screen kids, and we can do the things that the large public school district schools cannot do. So at the moment, we will be following the government guidelines and trying to provide an on-campus, in-person experience for everyone who's comfortable coming to campus. I had a question about sports on campus. Again, we're following the NIAA guidelines completely. We've got no more than 10 students at a time in our gyms. We're trying to socially distance as much as you can in playing sports. As of today, we will be talking with the coaches and the staff about masking as a result of the governor's order that was made yesterday. So we're doing what we can to make it as safe as possible. As of now, again, it's a moving target, and then the Nevada Interscholastic Athletic Association is providing us with guidance, and we were following it to the letter. And the final question that I had before I get to the questions that are being asked right now, I've got 9 on the screen that I will get to. The final question was, if plan 3, when we have partial in-person and partial distance learning, if we have to really limit the number of people on campus, if that happens, will we pay attention to family coordination so that kids aren't on campus on different days? And the answer to that is yes. We'll do everything we can to accommodate families if we have to keep, certain groups on campus and certain groups off. Like I said, my plan is to have everybody on campus come August. So to turn to your questions, I have 14 open questions. Some of these are not questions, they are just greetings. So I appreciate them. Hello, Petrina. Good to see you. Thanks for being here. What is the potential effect upon school athletics in the upcoming year? Any thoughts on team practices? As of now, we're following the NIAA's guidelines for upper school athletics. And one of the things that we really need to take into account here is we could lock down a whole lot on our campus, but does it make any sense if the entire community is wide open and I don't have any control over what happens off this campus? Does it make any sense for us to sort of stick our head in the sand and pretend like our rules on campus are going to be are going to provide safety once kids leave campus? So we have to exist in, like I said, a fluid environment. We have to respond to governmental orders, because that's what the entire community is going to be doing. So like I said, we can take heightened precautions, but all bets are off when students leave this campus. So when you see what is the potential effect upon school athletics, that could be anything from being shut down. I mean, we're looking at the NCAA, what they're doing. There's a couple of colleges that have also already said that they're pulling the plug on athletics for the year, or at least for the fall. And so we are currently engaged in varsity practices with limitations imposed by the NIAA. We're following those to the letter, and we are going to have to take a wait and see approach. I would love to offer the full Meadows experience, provided that it's safe. And if it's not safe, then it's not something that we can do. The next question, will kids be required to wear masks in accordance with the governor's directive? That's a very good question. I think that we need to get used to the notion that third graders on up need to be wearing masks. The science is very, very good on this, that the risk of transmission drops so substantially if multiple people are wearing masks. So, for your 9-year-olds and up, this incidentally is in accordance with what the panel of doctors that I've assembled to advise the school have said, is that when you've got little ones, 4, 5, 6-year-olds, they're going to be touching and adjusting and whatever so much that it actually becomes more of a hazard, which is why we think that the governor said, children 9 years and up ought to be wearing masks. So our assumption right now, as of now, is that kids will be asked to wear masks if they're in the 3rd through 12th grade. Will there be an option for remote only learning for parents that are worried about exposure? The answer to that is yes. Like I said before, I would ask you that you work directly with your division director, because that's going to look different depending on whether your children are in lower school, right, and have one primary teacher, or if they have 8 primary teachers in middle school. Okay, so work with them directly. We want to be able to accommodate. Our commitment is simultaneously to be able to offer an on-campus experience, but also to understand that some folks can't come to campus because of medical concerns and so forth. So let's see. This is a really good question. It has to do with allergies. And if a child is sneezing a lot, do we need to get a doctor's note to indicate that the sneezing is related to hay fever or allergies or whatever else? I would really appreciate that. I think that would be a really great idea to indicate to us, to work with your pediatrician and have your pediatrician give us some assurance, because what we're going to be doing is looking for symptoms, right? And if kids have symptoms, if they have a fever, if they're coughing and sneezing and the rest, then we're going to ask them to go home and likely stay home for either 2 weeks or a negative COVID test. So if you've got a child who has bad allergies, we would really like to work with you on making sure that we're just keeping everybody as safe as possible. So I do appreciate that question, and let's talk, let's work. Do you have a line in the sand when you will have a direct answer? I assume that question has to do with what things will look like. Yes, I mean, I've got a plan for faculty, so I assume that's going to be a couple of weeks ahead of school starting. So I assume that we should have a clear picture in the next 3 to 4 weeks. So late July, early August, we ought to be able to say this is our definite plan. When you look at the Clark County School District, they've published their plan because they can't change it, right? They've got to be able to implement for hundreds of thousands of students a plan moving forward. We have 4 plans and we can execute variations of all of them. So right now, our plan actually will keep kids just as distanced and be able to use heightened protocols that the district cannot, while keeping every one of our students on campus. And so that is the plan. Let's see. Will COVID-19 impact MAPS programs? The answer to that is likely. If we have to cohort in the lower school and we want to keep kids together and keep them in their group of 20 in the lower school, then it's very likely that MAPS programs will go remote. But again, we don't know that for certain. It just doesn't make sense to have, cohorting of 20 students and then to have them exposed to 8, maybe 10 cohorts after school. So it will likely have an impact, but we're playing that by ear. Can we go ahead and order the textbooks on the list provided before we get a firm schedule? The answer to that is absolutely. We will be offering all the classes in our catalog. And so if you know what your schedule is, and you will relatively soon if you don't already. But yeah, you should be able to buy the books because we are going to be teaching classes from those books, most likely in person on campus. Next question, are we going to follow CDC guidelines each time there's a positive test on campus? For example, if a positive test comes up in lower school, what will the protocol be? Good question. If we are able to completely, completely cohort and keep kids separate in groups of 20, and someone comes down with it, then what I would assume is that we would close that area, that classroom, for 3 to 4 days for cleaning, as the CDC recommends. And then my assumption would be that we would ask those students to stay home until they get a negative COVID test, or for 2 weeks, whichever is easier or most efficient. So with contact tracing being where it is in this state, the best we can do is try to limit exposure. Now, it starts to get a little bit more complicated, obviously, if you're doing that in the upper school. And so because of the complexity of upper school schedules, virtually no two students have the same schedule, right? Between electives, but also academic classes, students have different levels of Spanish. They have different levels of math. They're pursuing different paths of study. So it's impossible for us to cohort because we don't have 20 students who have the exact same schedule, right, at any point in the upper school. So they're going to have contacts further broader in their school day than you're going to see if we are cohorting in middle and lower. So it's going to be on a case-by-case basis, and we'll be following the Nevada Health District's orders regarding what we do as a result of this. I lost that question. Let's see. I'm just going from the top to the bottom, so I apologize if I didn't publish that question. I'll get to it again. What are the protocols you intend to put in place to minimize COVID transmission? For example, how you create social distancing in classes and how will you enforce it on campus? Well, the good thing is that our class sizes are already small, right? And so what we're able to do in terms of cohorting, if you have a lower school experience where you've got 20 kids in a room, and they have contact with themselves and they eat lunch together and they go to the playground together, and maybe if what we see and what we decide is that we have a couple of classes or maybe two cohorts will go to PE together, but those are the only contacts that they have, right? And so what that allows us to do is not necessarily distance between those young students, but it does allow us to contact trace really, really effectively. So we know who on our campus has been exposed to the possible COVID carrier. How are we going to create social distancing in classes? Well, if you're in a cohort, we won't have to as much. You'll try to keep kids separate to the amount possible. And the same is true, if we stagger passing periods in middle and upper school, we'll be able to, remind kids, keep them separate. We've got stickers for the floor to show kids how far 6 feet is apart, and so on and so forth. So none of this is going to be an exact science, right? We can't put a 6-foot bubble around students, but what we can do is create a climate in which students are mindful of these things and pursue it that way. Would the school day be reduced at all, either by time in class to allow to clean between classrooms, or the school day shortened? As of now, no. We plan to pursue a normal traditional school day, which means roughly 8 to 3, which is what we've always done. And so we are confident with our enhanced cleaning protocols that we're working on even now, and running a small summer camp of beginning school students and a small in-person summer camp of lower school students. It has given us an opportunity to test how long it takes to clean things, how long it takes to appropriately sanitize things, and so forth. My assumption is that if we have an outbreak, we'll go to a third-party cleaning crew, and that will shut down a building maybe for a day or 3, according to the CDC guidelines. But as far as the day is concerned, our assumption is that our school day will continue to be a traditional day. Are all teachers, faculties, and students required to wear masks? I think I answered that question. I answered a question regarding maps. Look, I'm getting more questions, or I'm getting more concerns about when will we know? And look, I get it. I totally get it. My concern is I'm not going to put the institution in a position where I make a determination based on information I have today that is going to change in 3 days. So what I'm asking you to do right now is to plan for coming to campus every single day for a traditional school day. That is what we're doing. So you know what the schedule is. It is going to be every single day for every single student, unless we're forced to do otherwise. And in that case, it's completely out of my hands. Okay, so as far as the individual, if we see that mask wearing and people start paying attention and the numbers drop substantially, then we could become closer to normal. But right now, our commitment is to have students on campus, and that is our plan, unless we're forced to do otherwise. Um, do you really think we can keep kids distance in lower school? Well, the answer to that question is probably not, which is why the cohorting model is important to us, so that we don't have 360 kids mingling at all times. So I understand, and there's a reference in that question to other countries opening and then shutting back down. Israel had to shut back down, but Germany and Denmark didn't, right? So there are ways to do this. There are ways to keep kids safe and to try to keep them distance, and to enforce hand washing. I mean, even now there's hand sanitizer inside the door of every single classroom. There will be at every entrance. So kids will be asked to walk into a classroom, sanitize their hands, take a wipe, sanitize their desk, and we're off to the races. And then we've got, we require kids to hand wash throughout the day. I know in beginning school right now, they get a stamp on their hand. Their goal every day is to try to get that stamp washed off by the end of the camp day. We'll be doing things like this and really doing the very best that we can. The only way to 100% eliminate transmission is to close school. And that's not what I want to do. It's not, I think, healthy for kids. I think that the right thing to do is to try to open and try to provide kids with as much normalcy as possible. Another question around masks, which I've answered. Another question around maps. This is a good question. Some colleges are categorizing sports based on the closeness of contact. We have talked about that, but at the moment, I want students to be able to participate if the state is allowing participation, right? And so at the moment, we've looked at different sports, but I mean, you saw the tennis tournament, for example, the tennis tournament where Djokovic came down with COVID. And so there is a proximity in athletics that you can't avoid. And certainly the proximity is greater for football than it is for tennis, right? But at the moment, we're still keeping an eye on things. And we are, doing the best that we can to do that sport by sport. Our athletic director, Coach Gregersen, has actually written to the state to suggest that we start the school year with socially distanced athletics, to say, why don't we do track, and why don't we do tennis, and why don't we do sports where you can stay apart a little bit? And so far, they have not listened to our request. And so we are stuck in a position where we have to either tell our students, particularly seniors, who might have their last season in an athletic event ever, that, either we have to tell them they don't get to participate, or we have to try to participate in a way that is less than perfectly, less than ideal. So we are looking at that, and as things progress, we'll have more clarity. Let's see. This may be an unknown right now, but is there a plan to continue the aftercare programs? Yeah, answered that. We're going to try if we can, but if we're cohorting in lower school, there's no way for us to run after school programs unless we can, develop them and say this class can only take one of these 3 after school courses. And I mean, there's ways around this, but it can't be the complete program as we're used to if we are cohorting in the lower school. It's a question about masks and a question about temperature checks. Again, masks in 3rd grade and up, temperature checks, yes. That is our plan right now. As of now, our plan is to test everybody's temperature on their way into school, and anybody with fever will be quarantined, set in a room specifically set aside for that. They will then be retested in a few minutes to make sure that it wasn't just coming in from the warm outdoors or the car or whatever. And if they remain feverish, then they'll be sent home until such time as they can either be 72 hours fever-free, showing no symptoms, or they get a negative COVID test. Will we use sneeze guards? We are ordering sneeze guards if they can be returned. I'm in the process of looking at that, and that is really just so that you can get kids together with less transmission, right? And so particularly in lower and middle school, that's something that we are looking at. But if we are cohorting, again, the whole point of cohorting is to say we've got groups that we can contact trace. And so, we may not need to make our rooms as rigid as all that. So again, keeping an eye on things, and we'll make firm determinations about things like sneeze guards moving forward. This is a question about if we have queries or concerns about lower school, who do we contact? I would like you to contact me right now. Laura Kennedy will start work on July 1st. But since we are closing school on July 3rd for the 4th of July weekend, I've told her that she doesn't need to worry about coming in the 1st and 2nd. So it'll be after the 4th of July weekend. If you have questions about lower school, please reach out to me directly. I'm fielding those at the moment, and I will work to transition to the new director. Have you considered longer days so that the semester ends by the end of November earlier in anticipation of a second wave? We are keeping our options open on that, but I don't know that longer days, particularly for middle and upper school students, there's only so much learning you can do in a day, right? I just don't know that asking kids to come to school at 8 o'clock in the morning and having them stay until 5 or 6 o'clock at night in order to end earlier is going to be good for them. And so we still have to pay attention to the health and well-being of kids. And I don't know that asking them to do rigorous academics, at 130% of a day is going to be the right thing. But we are keeping our options open on scheduling. Lunch and recess times. We are looking at that. I have a meeting on Friday with the director of the corral. Most likely in lower and middle school, the idea will be that kids will eat in their classrooms. Doesn't make any sense to cohort and keep kids together in smaller groups if you're just going to have them at 180 kids at a time on the playground or in the classroom. So we're going to have to stagger out recess times to keep kids distanced, and that's the idea around lunch. And so we are looking, to spread kids out as much as possible, but we need to start thinking about utilizing classrooms for lunch periods. I feel like I've answered the question regarding the child testing positive. Just a comment. Someone has said that their coaches are doing a good job with safety. I appreciate you saying that. Let's see. We'll receive instruction on whom to contact regarding complete distance learning. Will distance learning affect promotion to higher grade? How will testing be conducted? It's a really good question, because what we have learned as a result of this is, as a result of the shutdown, is that online learning is not going to be the same as in-person learning. It's a different experience, and you have to use different teaching protocols and pedagogies to be effective. And so asking teachers to simultaneously run classes in person and remotely is going to be tough. And so if you have questions about what that's going to look like at your divisional level, please reach out to the division directors, okay? Because some of that is going to be dependent on how many kids we have staying home 100% of the time. If there's one in a class, that's going to be a different experience than if there's 5, right? And so we're going to need to know according to the families that we need to serve. So please reach out to your division directors. What is the best case scenario for upper school in August? The best case scenario is that numbers have gone down so much that we run an ordinary school day with masks. Best case scenario is that there's a magical vaccine in the next 3 weeks, but I don't want to be flip, right? That's not a reality. So I think that the best case scenario is that we'll run an ordinary schedule, keep kids as distanced as possible, and wearing masks at all times. Will the beginning school remain open if the rest of the school has to shut down? If so, what will that look like? That is a situation that we found ourselves in the shutdown in the spring. We could have stayed open. What I determined was that I wanted to close the campus because of all the uncertainty. Now that we have had the experience of running a summer camp, and we've had kids in those classrooms, and we feel confident and comfortable that we're staying safe, it is entirely likely that if there is an enforced shutdown of schools, that the beginning school will be allowed to remain open. My assumption is that we will remain open if the law allows us to do so. And what will that look like? It'll probably look a lot like summer camp right now, which is, keeping kids as distant as possible, opposite ends of tables, moving them in smaller groups so that they're not interacting with larger groups and so forth. Let's see, if and when a positive COVID case is discovered on campus, what will the school-wide response be? Like I said, I answered that question a little earlier. I think, we will shut down as necessary in order for cleaning. As possible, we'll contact trace and quarantine those kids who have been in contact, particularly easy to do in the younger grades, harder to do in the upper school, and we'll follow the governmental guidelines. As soon as we have a case, we reach out to the Southern Nevada Health District and, follow what they ask us to do. Has there been a discussion of bringing a nurse to campus? The answer to that is yes. There has been a discussion. We haven't reached a determination. At the moment, since the response to kids being sick is to send them home, right? We're not a boarding program, and we have extraordinarily responsive and invested parents. That is where we've stopped on that. So we have not made a move to make that higher, but it is something that we're continually taking a look at. Have you thought through criteria for adjusting state class sizes and schedules if there isn't a statewide school shutdown, but cases continue to rise? I think that's a really good question, but I feel like everything that I'm describing is doing that, right? So at the moment, we're already saying we're going to be adjusting class sizes, right? We have a situation where we can cohort, keep classes at our already small sizes, contact trace effectively if anything happens. In the upper school, we have a plan to be able to welcome every kid to campus, but limit class sizes to 9 students and 1 teacher. So yes, we have plans in place for doing that. If there isn't a statewide school shutdown, I'm confident that our school will be safer than any other, because we have gone through the process. Let's see, for families with parents in the medical field, their parents are exposed, will there be an option for children to quarantine and still do schoolwork as well and then return when it is safe? Of course. This is why we're building up our capability of doing online work so that students can stay home. We had some self-quarantines last year because people worked on the front lines and they had kids that they didn't want to expose to other kids. And we want to promote that kind of community health response. So thank you for that question. Will masks be provided by the school, and do the masks need to be N95 compliant? The science right now is that N95 is great, but we still need those for first responders. Cloth masks, if everybody's wearing them, are great. And so we will have a supply of disposable surgical masks in every building, but we will ask that students provide their own cloth mask. If you're more comfortable with your student wearing an N95 mask, that is up to you. Will lower school still have recess twice a day and lunch in the cafeteria? Lower school will have recess, absolutely, multiple times a day. It's important for kids to get out of their classrooms and to play. It's part of being a kid and part of being in school. Lunch is a little bit of a different story. I don't know that lunch in the cafeteria is going to be possible because the way we do lunch currently is 180 students. Even if you cut that in half, you're stretching lunch period to 2 hours in the day, right? So you're running 4 lunches, and that's still 90 kids in the room, which is not what we're looking for. It is extremely likely that kids will be eating lunch in their classrooms. Not for sure, but it's likely. In lower school, will students attend specialist classes or will the specialists come to them? Specialists will come to them. So yeah, and then the follow-up question is we're going to stagger recess and lunch options? Yeah, I mean, we need to build a schedule so that kids have access to the playground multiple times a day, that they get out of their seats and get up and get moving. And I think that we can be creative about offering class time outside and doing the things that we need to do that we know promotes the health and well-being of our kids. Got a question here. Can you walk through a scenario where a class has a student or faculty with a positive test? I feel like I answered that question already. We will follow the CDC guidelines and the Southern Nevada Health District and quarantine appropriately depending on the level. Plan for the student body to rehearse these new social distancing protocols in the first week. I think that, yes, everything that we do is going to have to be rehearsed. Kids are going to need to get used to this stuff, and it's not going to be an exact science. You know, kids aren't robots, as we know, so it's going to take some doing. And so, you know, we're going to start the school year as best we can, understanding that it's not going to be normal. Anybody who hopes that things are going to go back to normal, I think may be a little bit misguided. We're going to offer an on-campus experience, and it's going to be modified as a result of the realities that we face. So yeah, we're going to have to get kids used to doing this stuff, and it may be that we take baby steps at a time until we get going. A really good example of this is our carpool procedures. First week of school, it takes twice as long to get kids in lines, into cars, out of cars, and so forth. So we're working through that. Another question about masks. I answered that question. Let's see. A question about having parents on campus to volunteer to clean between classes. No. In fact, we'll be severely limiting the people who are allowed in the classrooms. So visitors are going to be extremely limited. The number of people who are allowed in the building, the people who are not teachers and students, will be severely limited. So that is not something that we have considered. Let's see. I've answered questions about aftercare. Okay, I think what I've done here is I've gone in reverse order with a lot of these questions. So these were asked early on, and then I got to them because people asked them later. So I'm really just dismissing a number of these. I'm sorry if you feel like I'm dismissing your question, please just reach out to me. Let's see. Will there be a difference in online versus in-person classes, or will it be the same? I really want to address this, okay? I refuse to have kids sit in front of a computer for 8 hours a day and call that school, right? So I can't have just a camera focused in the classroom and have students be expected to just do this, one class after another, one subject after another. So it's gonna be hybrid, which means that you might have 10 minutes of in-person learning on your computer, and then you'll be given some exercises to do on your own. You'll be given a recess break and so forth. And so it's gonna be different. The online version is never gonna be the same as the in-person version, because you can't have, and I think a lot of us had the experience of having kids at home, right? As the teacher was trying to do their best to reinvent the wheel and move their in-person lesson plans online, the kids were just sort of deflated. And the studies are showing us that it's not optimal for kids to just sort of sit and passively receive from a computer for hours a day. So the experience is going to be different, and it's going to be different based on the age level and different based on the class. So again, I invite you to reach out to your individual division directors to get more clarity around that. Ms. Lee is asking about performing arts. Will Meadows singers be suspended? Theater, this is very much up in the air. We will be offering arts programming. We will. The question is that going to include singing? Is that going to include band instruments? Is that going to include in-person experiences, or is that going to be much more of a remote experience, right? So we have kids on campus, but they're taking their theater classes separate from one another and doing so on screen so that they're not in close proximity and singing. We found that there are a couple of studies out there that show that singing is an activity that spreads a lot of viral material. So we've got to be really careful about this. I'm really excited and thankful that we have a director of the arts who we've hired. Michael Orman is in town, has been on campus working already, and he's working hard to address these realities. So the answer is that I'm committed to arts. I think that it's a vital part of our school experience, but there are limitations to what we can provide. So let's see. I have talked about what the faculty are doing this summer. Let's see. If a student needs to be out of school for 2 weeks due to being sick or quarantine, are those days excused? Yeah, they will be. I mean, we have to be extremely flexible regarding our attendance policy, and we're going to have to take it on a case-by-case basis. Course schedules, Ms. Larson reminds me that course schedules for middle and upper school will be available for viewing on student and parent portals during the first week in July. So thank you for that. There is an option to continue remote learning. Please reach out to your directors. We will be recording this. Somebody asked if this is going to be available later. And yes, it is being recorded right now, and we will provide it to the entire school community. We talked about lunch. Let's see. If students are eating in their classrooms, what is the plan for sanitizing prior to eating and after? Who will supervise them? I don't know the answer to that question. That question was from a faculty member, and we will work on that internally. So those are details that we need to work out. Again, details from faculty members about lunch. We'll get to these things. Are any teachers not coming back that were intending to come back because they're in a high risk category? As of now, you are aware of all the retirements. So we've been working with faculty members, really trying to work with them to offer any experience or any flexibility if they want to work from home and so forth. So far, we have not seen a huge number of people who are uncomfortable coming back to work. Options for families with compromised immune systems. Like I said, if you would like to work from home, if you would like your students to work from home, that's entirely up to you. And we want to accommodate you. Please work with your division director. So Ms. Hirsch asked me to remind everyone that we are committed to doing a better job this year of making sure that we do check-ins constantly with students who are quarantining or who are learning from home or learning remotely. We're really invested because we know the toll that kind of isolation can take on kids. So our plan right now, and Ms. Hirsch is instrumental in developing this plan outward, is that we're going to take a all hands on deck approach to make sure that those kids get outreach, they get support, they get contacts from the school community. So thank you, Ms. Hirsch. What about face shields instead of masks? I can appreciate that question, but right now, the literature indicates that the mask is the better option. How are you going to handle kids from different cohorts in the lower school playing on outdoor equipment? My assumption is the outdoor equipment will be balls and items that they can use per class, and we will likely, if we are cohorting, ask kids to stay off of the slides and the monkey bars. Are plans being made to cohort during Carline? We will have we'll have a Carline experience, and we're working that out right now to see what that looks like. If that means multiple drop-off points for different grades and so on and so forth. We are looking at drop-off. We're looking at multiple points of pickup after school so that we can spread kids out so that they're not all in the common. One way or the other, carpool will happen, but it won't happen the way it has happened in the past. I think I did answer that question and then lost it. Will teachers, staff be required to take a COVID test before returning to campus in August? That's a good question. And my problem with requiring anyone to take a test is, one, the number of false negatives that the current test, the gold standard, is producing indicates that you could have a negative test and still have the virus. The other thing is, one test is not a guarantee that you're not a carrier the next day, the next hour. So having everyone tested the day before we start school provides us with a degree of security only for maybe 8 hours. And so what I think that we need to do is utilize precautions, social distancing as much as we can, closely monitor symptoms, and just stay vigilant. What can you do at home? I really appreciate that question. What can we do at home to make sure the kids are ready to go? I would say normalize the discussion of the virus. It's not, it shouldn't be, I don't want it to be traumatic. I don't want kids to feel like they're in danger. And so having discussions with your kids about, look, this is how much it cuts down the virus. If everybody wears a mask, it goes from 70% possibility of transmission to 1.5%. I mean, you've seen the charts on social media and so forth. So I think talking with your kids about why we're doing what we're doing and what the actual risks are, as opposed to, you know, it really helped my son, who's a rising fourth grader. We did the numbers, right? We said, okay, how many people have contracted the disease in Nevada? How many people are in Nevada? And we started saying, okay, at this rate, it's not a good thing, but at this rate, how long would it take for everybody to get exposed? And so working through those numbers with bright kids like ours is really, is I think really helpful. That and practice wearing a mask. Will the entire class need to stay home if we're quarantining? Yes. I mean, if we're in a cohort model, then yeah, people would need to stay home until they get a negative test or until they, you know, until 2 weeks. I've talked about food service. If we have fall sports, will you still require ninth grade student athletes to attend study hall in the library? That's our learning lab. We're not going to put that many kids together in one space. Learning lab is going to be something that we still value, but is going to need to be spread out. So good news is we have hundreds of thousands of square footage of buildings, and so we can address that as we need to. So thank you for that question. Possibility for testing all students before the year starts. I just addressed that. I answered the question early on about tuition. Let's see. What happens to the rest of the students in that class? Well, if we have to shut down and there is a positive test in that class, then everybody's got to stay home until we know that they are not positive. I've addressed carpool and recess, I believe. Let's see. A meetup and introduction to new students. Absolutely. Will you please reach out directly? If you're a new student, if you're new to the school, we don't want this to slow down your onboarding to the community. So I really do appreciate you asking that. You can either reach out to Mr. Siegel in the middle school, you can reach out to me directly, and I will pass you along to the right people in the Meadows School Parents Association, and we'll make sure that you get an introduction. Let's see. I've answered the question about, okay, well, this is a more comprehensive question. Let me go ahead and address it. We are looking at clear barriers, the possibility, improved air handling. We're looking at keeping our HVAC on at all times. We use the highest level of HIPAA filter in all of our AC units already. And we are looking at what the data is telling us on whether or not, even if we don't run the AC constantly, you can run the fan, right? And so we're thinking about keeping air circulating all the time. The other thing that we have going in our favor is that there is no central air system in our classrooms, right? Each classroom is controlled by its own thermostat and has its own unit on the roof. So the air that is being circulated is not being broadcast out to the rest of the school building. UV, let's see, ultraviolet lights. That is a question that I have posed to my team of medical experts, my team of physicians, and they have said that there is not enough data on whether or not the UV lights are actually effective to warrant that kind of investment, because the units do run something like $5,000 a piece, and they would need to be, in every room. And so, and that doesn't give us any indication or any assurance that it's going to be useful. Let's see. Colleges have announced they will end classes before Thanksgiving, then go online for final exams. Is Meadows considering this? Look, if I could change all of our plans and get back to school today, maybe that would be the best thing. However, that's not where we are right now. And we still need the rest of the summer to continue to train and plan. And so, like I said, I don't want to hurry through an educational experience when there's not, great data about what's going to happen moving forward. So I can appreciate the question. But I think that when you look at Notre Dame and other schools who are doing that and hurrying up their schedule, they're actually doing that because they have people coming from all around the world. So they're doing away with their breaks. They're doing away with Christmas break because they don't want people going away and coming back, right? What we have is people going away and coming back all the time, every single day, right? So people aren't limited to campus and they're not in dorms. So it's a little bit of a different situation than what the colleges are looking at. I answered the question about lunch and the corral. You'll get more information as we talk. The Sage, which is our dining partner, they've issued ongoing updates on how their safety procedures are working. And I really appreciate the clarity that they've provided. So we'll be able to do anything from serve lunch in classrooms to serving lunch outside where kids can distance. I mean, there's going to be a lot of options for us. So stay tuned. Let's see. If we decide to send kids back to school, can they wear PPE instead of uniforms? Please reach out to me. If that is something that you're interested in doing, I know that PPE is not provided in Meadows Plaid. So let's talk. I'm interested in student safety, and if that makes you feel comfortable, let's have a conversation. Do masks need to adhere to uniform guidelines? No. Will school hours be the same? Yes. Will you require the staff faculty get their flu vaccine this year? I can't require that by law. Can K2 kids wear masks if they choose to? Absolutely. I'm sorry I didn't mention that before. If you have young children and you'd like them to wear masks, I encourage it. Will there be distance learning available? Answered that. I hope I answered that. And the answer to that is yes. If the student needs to stay away from school for health reasons or quarantine reasons, we will be providing them with that information. If children or family members in the household travel during the school year, will you be enforcing a 14-day quarantine from school upon return? I would like for people to just be as honest with us as we possibly can, right? So if you're going to a place, it's getting a little interesting now because the United States is the worldwide hotbed for COVID. So going anywhere else might actually make you a little bit safer. But one way or the other, we'll be asking families just to let us know. Look, if you're traveling out of the country, will you please let us know what are the protocols that you're observing? How are you making sure that you're safe? And let's just be comfortable and work together as a community. I had people call me and say, hey, we aren't coming back to school we aren't coming back to Vegas 14 days early before school starts, but we are quarantining in a rental house in Oregon or Idaho or whatever. And I said, look, that's the spirit of what I'm asking, right? If you're not wandering through airports for the 5 days prior to coming back to school, great. You're following the spirit of what we're trying to do here, which is to work as a community to mitigate the spread. Okay, so I appreciate this, and I do want to work with families because, look, we cannot shut down. We can't shut down the economy. We can't shut down our education. We cannot shut down our lives in the face of this. And so we have to take appropriate precautions, and we have to support one another in this process. So thank you for that question. Masks do not need to be N95 compliant. Cloth will work. N95 is obviously allowed. What is the plan for parent volunteers in the lower school? Right now, volunteerism will be severely limited because we need to keep the numbers of people in the buildings down. Will there be a training module sent to students about protocols before school begins? I think that's a really great idea. Thank you for that question. And yes, yeah, we will put it on our list. I had the opportunity to hire a young videographer this summer, and I took that opportunity to help support both in-class video taking, but also providing these kinds of remote informational pieces. So her name is Michaela Hall. She's a sister of an alumna, and she's going to be she's already working with us to produce videos, and I think that's a great project for her. So thank you for the suggestion. Let's see. Oh, when should we expect the notification regarding teacher selection in the lower school? That's going to be coming in a couple of weeks. That'll be early July. Thank you for your question. Answered that question about travel. I think I answered this question. Would you clarify expectations for family quarantine as of August 1st? I just want you to be reasonable. Let's just work together and not expose each other to, all kinds of stuff around the community. It's hard to do that. We're in phase 2. Businesses are open, and obviously you're going to live the lives you need to live. I just didn't want people to be doing, high risk behaviors, maskless travel, and so forth in the days coming up to the school year starting. So if you have questions or concerns, please reach out to me directly. I want to be as flexible as I can, but I also have a responsibility to try my best to protect the community. I answered questions about the corral and about masks and school colors. I'm down to 28 questions. If you guys want to bear with me, I think I can get through them. Permit kids to wear non-uniform color masks? Of course you can. Yes, that is something that we've said already. A teacher asked what after-school carpool looks like. That is going to be, we're going to try to spread things out as much as we can. We're going to play it by ear. If we're in cohorting, then we're going to try to keep kids with their cohort, and they may be picked up at different places around campus, and we will let parents know ahead of time. We cannot run, if we are social distancing, we can't run carpool pickup as we have in the past. Will lower school have programs like Good Citizen programs? The answer to that is no. I mean, we won't be having assemblies. We won't be having all school meetings, and we're working really hard to think about what those events look like, because those are part of the culture and fabric of our school. And I think that they're extremely important. So I'm already thinking about, how do we let the blue team paint the bell when they come back to campus? If it's one classroom at a time, if it's one teacher at a time coming and, doing something celebratory. I think that we need to find ways to celebrate our kids, and we need to find ways to preserve that sense of community while being as safe as we possibly can. Should we cancel travel plans for the holiday break? The answer to that is no. You should continue to plan your travel. Will there be field trips? The answer to that is going to depend on the location and whether or not we're capable of socially distancing, or if we can cohort a class at a time, one class at a time, as opposed to putting a bunch of kids together on a bus. So that is a good question. Again, as of now, face shields, I would much rather see kids in cloth masks, and that is going to be the rule. That's on field trips. The drop-off process look like for lower school, and recess once they prepare for the day? That is likely not going to happen. So kids will likely go to their classroom. Then we'll schedule recesses early in the day. We'll stagger them appropriately. The good news is we have a giant playground that kids can play on, and keep distance and keep outside. The science shows that outdoor spaces are incredibly unlikely to spread the virus. So we can spread kids out and give them the experience on the classroom that we know that they need. Pick up and drop off, I have addressed, I think. Can you explain on how the cohort model is in line with the CDC guidelines for physical distancing? It is not. It is not. And so it's a choice to make to prioritize contact tracing over social distancing. So, we can keep kids as distant as possible in the classrooms, do a really good job of sanitizing everything, but understand that young children need a classroom environment. And so we keep them separate as we can. And right now, if what we decide, and we're capable of doing this, if you put pods of desks in a lower school classroom, pods of 4, you can fit 5 pods of 4 in a classroom socially distanced. If you put up barriers, plexiglass barriers between those 4, then those kids, they can see each other, you can see through them, you can see everything in class. So they are socially distanced, and they are podded in a cohort, right, together in a classroom. So it doesn't strictly follow the CDC guidelines, but what it does is it gives us the ability to keep kids together and to keep them on campus. It gives us the ability to contact trace after the fact, which is extremely important so that we can mitigate spread beyond those 20. And so I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Will twins be in the same cohort? If they're in the same classroom. And if they're not, then they will be in different cohorts, right? But we will not separate families if we ultimately have to go, as I said before, if we ultimately have to go to a situation where some kids are on campus and some are off, which I hope is not going to be the case. But yeah, if your twins are in different classrooms, if your students are in different classrooms, they're going to be in different cohorts moving forward. Okay. Can we be confident that faculty and staff will be vigilant about sending home students showing signs of illness? Yes and yes, but we also need families to work with us on this. And this isn't everyone, but we all work, and sometimes our kids have the sniffles and we say, you can tough it out. We need families to be really vigilant. We need to not give kids Tylenol before you send them to school in the morning so that their temperature drops. If they have a temperature, they need to stay home. Okay, so we will be vigilant, but we also need to partner as a community with families on how to make this happen. I answered that question about programs and assemblies. What does it look like for the class if a teacher has a fever or needs to quarantine? We will be working with faculty members on that question. If faculty members are sick and need to stay home, they need to stay home. If they're capable of teaching remotely, then we'll have a substitute in the class and have the teacher work with kids. And so the remote learning possibility is a two-way street, right? Not only can we provide an opportunity for kids to learn remotely, but we know that we can provide teachers the opportunity to teach remotely, right? And so if teachers need to stay away, we'll continue to work with them. And if they're well enough to teach, but just have a symptom or two and they're concerned and we're concerned, then we'll keep the teacher home and we'll, ask them to teach the class remotely if they can. And if not, that's why, we are in the process right now of building out our sublists. Another question about out-of-state travel and quarantining, answered that. If we do need to do remote learning, can you please inform parents too of the online class schedules? Yes. One of the things that we got caught flat-footed on when we turned to remote learning is scheduling and communication. And so what we've been talking about a lot is not only training kids and teachers in this, but also having a series of webinars for parents so that you can say, okay, this is where you need to look for the schedules. This is what your child's schedule daily is going to be. And it's going to be a regular schedule in lower school and middle school and upper school, including specialists, right? So it's not hit or miss classroom by classroom by classroom. So yes, thank you for asking that question. If we have to go remote, we're going to have a much stricter approach to how we go about providing scheduling and providing normalcy for students. Another question about assemblies. Yes, the question about can we stay home? Yes, please reach out to your division director. One question, why am I not wearing a mask right now? Because I'm alone in my office. That's why. I appreciate it. But on campus, so that you know, I've been asking for weeks now that all faculty, if you're not working alone in your classroom, that we ask that everybody in common spaces, if you're within a 6-foot proximity to anyone, you need to be wearing a mask. All of our custodial staff has been observing that and so forth. So if this needs to quickly become a norm, it has to become a norm for us. And if it's not, we need to address it. So thank you. Even on a lighter note, I do appreciate that. What about siblings? If a child from another division is in contact with a student, we need to have that conversation, right? We need to talk about how far do we need to contact trace, and we can do that on campus. If we have a child who becomes ill, I'm going to assume that their siblings are going to stay home as well until they can satisfy us and each other that they are not infected. So we'll take that on a case-by-case basis, but my assumption is that we will notify people in a classroom, hey, this person's sibling came down with it. We highly recommend that you get tested, and we understand if you want to quarantine. Let's see. Still asking families to be back in Vegas by the 1st. Not necessarily, and yes. I hope that that's clear. If you have plans to quarantine and help me safeguard the health of this community, awesome, right? What I don't want people to be doing is, engaging in highly risky behaviors that puts the entire community at risk. We're coming back to campus. A large group of people is coming back to campus. The last thing I want to do is have to shut down school or shut down a building or a classroom within 3 days of returning because people weren't careful. So please, if you can make it back to Vegas by the 1st, I would love for you to do so, and to stay in your house, and let's start the school year as healthy as we possibly can. Thank you for your question. If a COVID test is not as reliable as just mentioned, why would it be a requirement for a kid to get back to school in the event he gets sick? The answer to that is it's what we have. I understand that there's a logical disconnect there, but it is what we have, and we have to promote a sense of normalcy as much as we can. We can't have this sort of like war of attrition where, one kid, it's sort of like it's a domino effect, right? If we can't utilize the tests to normalize things, then we can't keep school open, because everybody's going to have to stay home for 2 weeks at a time, again and again and again and again, and it's chaos. So the answer to that is very good question and a logical one, but we have to do the very best that we can with the tools at our disposal. I answered the question about the corral. Please consider, if you're uncomfortable with the corral, packing lunches for your students. Let's see. Having meet the teacher day before school starts for the parents to meet their children's new teacher. Excellent question. As we get closer, we're going to be defining our back to school events. So if we need to distance, what we can do is spread that out over a couple of days, right? And have assign different teachers different experiences, or assign different cohorts in the upper school different experiences. We can utilize outdoor spaces. We can get tents. There's a whole lot that we can do to normalize the experience. And I've been thinking a lot about how we go about getting kids to meet their teachers, to have the fun experience of walking and saying hello to their teachers, seeing their friends again, hopefully 6 feet apart. But I think that we're lucky to have 40 acres. And I think that, we can utilize that to our benefit, and also utilize the fact that we're so small that we can stagger these things out. You'll also note that we are having graduation on the mall for the first time. We're going to do a socially distanced graduation on August 1st. So we're already thinking in terms of utilizing the outdoor spaces while spreading people out. Upper school question regarding tennis practice. Practice was moved to 4:30 because the freshmen had to attend learning lab, which means the rest of the kids had to wait at school until 4:30. Will there be a place for them to wait this year? Yes. I mean, we've got to provide a space for them. And like I said before, learning lab can't happen in the library. So we're going to have to spread people out a little bit. We think that learning lab, it was huge for us, particularly for our younger student athletes. Those kids, the turnaround in terms of their ability to stay eligible in the first few weeks as they were getting used to upper school was massive. And so we believe in providing that extra support, and we're going to continue to do so. And if we're asking kids to be on campus, we're going to offer them the opportunity to stay distant from one another. Will teachers be wearing masks during lectures? Yes. Yeah, I mean, teachers are going to be wearing masks. There might be some teachers, like world languages teachers, where if they are in a lesson where they need to be explaining something, they will wear a shield and stay distanced from the students in their classroom. But by and large, teachers will be wearing masks. Will children have a difficult time staying in their classrooms the whole day? I appreciate that question, and the answer to that is yes. But we're not going to ask them to stay in their classrooms the whole day, particularly younger children. We're going to have to break these things up. right? We're going to have, and that teachers do that in the classroom all the time. They get kids up out of their seats, they get them moving around and interacting with one another, which is why we think that the cohorting is so important in lower school, right? Because kids need proximity to one another. They need to interact with each other, and to keep them, 6 feet apart at all times is not optimal. So the kids will be up and out of their seats. They'll be up and outside. They can take laps around the building. So we've got a lot of space on our campus to make that a reality. Thank you for asking. Let's see. I think I answered this question about teachers teaching remotely. Lower school twins, again, in the same cohort if they're in the same class. And by the way, if you have twins in lower school and prior to this, your request was to have your twins separated and you'd like to rethink that, reach out to me immediately, because we're in the process of finalizing all of these lists. And if that's important to you and you feel like I do, that, if we're cohorting, you might want your kids to have the same experience, let me know, because once those go out, I can't move kids around without asking other families to move, right? Because we're projected to be very, very full in the lower school. So thank you for that question. Will second grade have the bake sale, field trips, and other traditions? We will do everything we can to normalize the school year. So if the bake sale needs to take place outdoors and far apart on the grass, then we can do that. Our traditions are part of what make us who we are, and we're not going to sacrifice these things. But we also have to balance that with taking care of the health of the community. So thank you. We do want to offer field trips where we can and when we feel that it's safe. And so we'll continue to do that and try to schedule them and slate them so that, we can do them one class or one cohort at a time. When it comes to service hours, is there an approved list of virtual options to peruse? Please reach out to your club advisors. I don't know a lot personally about virtual options in community service. My hope is that, we'll be able to get out and provide some service opportunities for students in person, but please reach out to your division director and club advisors. So another question about plexiglass that I did answer already. Will there be barriers set up between students in lower school? Again, I answered that question. If our child needs to quarantine, will we have the remote learning opportunity? Yes, I answered that question. Staggered passing periods and staggered lunches built into the upper school schedule, since there is no possibility of cohorting. Staggering, no. Well, I don't want to answer that question directly, because I think that that's still a bit of a moving target. Ms. Larson has just finalized the ability for us to have all upper school students on campus with social distancing. So I think that the details are still coming out on how we're going to move kids around campus. I think that a lot of this is going to need to rely on good mask wearing, good hand hygiene, and common sense, right? So everybody's going to have to be flexible in the upper school. If you lose 3 or 4 minutes because kids are coming to class a little bit late because we've asked them to stay and stagger, we're just going to have to be flexible. So the answer to that, Mr. Vance, is talk to Dana and we will see. I answered the question about siblings. We need to work on that in a case-by-case basis, because if you have different cohorts in different places, with the 14-day quarantine, I assume that siblings will want to stay home as well. But we'll follow the health district's orders on that and work with families. Will there be a remote learning opportunity? Yes. If different models work better for our family at different seasons, can we toggle between in-class and online? I'm okay with that. I understand that different things are going to work for different families at different times. However, it can't be this week we need to be online and next week not, right? Because that's not fair to teachers. If they've got a plan and a fully online experience for a child, because what it's not going to be is homework, right? We're not just going to send home homework as though they're sick with a cold for a couple of days. So it will need to be for longer periods of time, and I would encourage you to work with the division directors on that. Will middle school students be supervised separated after school until pickup, or they still be free released at the end of the day? That remains to be seen. That really does remain to be seen. My assumption is that we're going to have to schedule out in the same way a pickup procedure for middle school students who are not participating in sports if sports are a reality for middle school? So another good question and a detail that I'm confident that we can address. Will we need to wear uniforms at home if we're online learning? I don't know. I'm starting to believe that that's probably a good idea, just because I saw my own son, and I think that the uniform brings a sense of normalcy as opposed to wearing pajama pants and a t-shirt to school every day, which is what he was doing. And so we are in the process right now of working out what online learning expectations are. And it'll be an appendix to our student parent handbook that you get every year. And so we will be addressing what the norms are. Like, you can't go to school in your bed. Like, you can't go to school and you have to keep your camera on if you're in a Zoom meeting, and so on and so forth. So we will be providing answers to all of those questions, because we understand that people need a sense of normalcy, and they need clarity around what our expectations are. Will teachers in beginning school wear masks? As of now, that is the governor's order. Right now, up until now in camp, they have only if they're coming into 6 foot, into a 6 foot radius of a child, working closely with them on something, they've put their masks on. Masking is really, really important, and it really cuts down the risk. And so I would err on the side of yes, wearing masks. And so you need to, little kids need to get used to that notion that teachers might be wearing masks in 6 weeks. I've tried to discuss field trips and traditions. Can the children check out library books? That is a question that I haven't yet considered. I'm sorry. This is one that is catching me a little bit by surprise. I think that's a really good question. I think the answer is likely no. Simply because the contact of you never know between the number of students who make contact with that book, that doesn't seem very safe to me. But let me work with the librarians. I know that the Clark County Library District is opening on some levels. So let me learn what I can learn about how to make that as safe as possible, because kids need access to books. So thank you for that question, and I will get back to you. We'll have clarity around that soon. Who is going to do contact tracing on campus? Well, we can't do all the contact tracing ourselves. So we're going to rely on but we'll do the best that we can with cohorts, and then we'll rely on the Southern Nevada Health District, who hopefully is continuing to develop contact tracing as we move forward. How will clubs and electives be handled in middle school if you have students staying in their cohort groups? Well, Mr. Siegel is working on plans for that and is working closely with Michael Orman. What it might mean is that kids have a greater variety of elective experiences in the fall than they would have otherwise. So if they chose elective A and elective B, they might actually experience electives A through F as we get every kid and different experiences in the electives, which might be a net positive in the end, but that is sort of what we're looking at. Can we provide those kinds of experiences? But also, if kids have electives, we can have them leave different, and we can keep them well socially distanced and outdoors in their electives, then that might be something that we can do as well. See, how many students will there be in the 9th grade class? Right now we have 80 offers out, and I think 74 students have paid deposits. So something along those lines, 73, 74. I know last I checked, we had 80 offers out to students, knowing that, people decide to go elsewhere after they're given an offer. That can happen, or they don't get the financial aid package that they think that they need in order to attend. So we'll have another large freshman class. Thank you for asking. We're really excited. Printing for middle and upper school in the library. I haven't gotten that far. That's a very specific question. My assumption is that most middle and upper school work is going to need to go as digital as possible, right? Because you can't be having students, 180 students turning in pieces of paper in the middle school and say that you're distancing appropriately, right? Because that endangers the teacher, and then they're passing it, and it's, so my assumption is that we're going to be doing a lot less printing in the middle and upper school. Ms. Smilo in the upper school library indicated that the public library holds books for 4 days before release. So if that's the policy, thank you, Ms. Smilo, for letting me know that. My final question here, thank you all for your patience. I can't believe we still have 210 attendees. You guys have been really patient with me as I've sort of figured out this webinar procedure. I have one final question on under what circumstances will the school consider going back to normal when a vaccine is available? Yes. If there are testing protocols in place, if a test is developed that we can utilize on a daily basis, then things will get really normal, really fast. But right now, you can't subject children especially to that throat nasal swab test on a regular basis. I wouldn't ask children to do that. And so we don't have the ability to test. So it's either going to be testing or it's going to be vaccination. My hope and yours is likely that that's going to happen within the next 12 months. And we will see how that proceeds forward. Okay, so let's see. I think that's it. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, Josh Ford indicates that there's a couple of questions in the chat. Let me open that up really fast. Let's see where we are. Oh my goodness, I'm not done by a long shot. Listen, I've been monitoring, I think, over 100 questions in the Q&A. And so let me see what I can do, because I hope that a lot of people have asked questions that I haven't answered. Ms. Kennedy says hello. She's excited to join the Meadows and that she's present. She's in the room. She wanted you to know. Let's see. Questions about lunch, questions about testing, questions about tuition, lunch. If I'm missing something, drop it into the Q&A. So Clark County Library has the ability to check out ebooks. We might be able to do something like that. There might be a licensing agreement, and I will ask Ms. Stewart and Ms. Friedman to take a look at what's possible. But if they're doing physical book checkout after 4 days, as Ms. Smilo suggested, I see no problem with that. And Ms. Smilo says we have plenty of ebooks available now. That is the upper school. And finally, let me jump back over to the Q&A. And there's a question regarding sports, but I think I've hit sports a few times. So yeah, I think all the questions that remain in the Q&A I've already addressed. I don't want to keep you all any further. Thank you so much for your attention, for your thoughtful questions. I hope I've been able to answer most of them. And again, look, this is very, very difficult for all of us. I want you to understand that this has been one of the most trying times for educators, not just myself, but for every educator on campus, because as educators, we're planners. If you're any good at this gig, what you do is you lay out a plan for your kids and you execute it. And you make course adjustments along the way, but you've got to be able to plan. So it's been extraordinarily frustrating for all of us to not be able to plan. And so we feel your frustration. We understand where you are. And I really, I want to thank you for your patience. And if more questions arise, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm always happy to hear from parents. I'll be working through the summer. I think I'm going to take a few days off is all, and I'll be here for you. So thank you so much, everyone. So great to hear from so many of you, and we'll be in touch. Take care. We'll see you in August.